Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new video. For many of us, the RMS Titanic introduced us to the world of ocean liners and ships. Today, it continues to captivate the ship community with countless books and movies. The most famous, of course, are A Night to Remember from 1958 and, of course, James Cameron's Titanic from 1997. This tragedy has fascinated people for generations. Over the years, there have even been projects attempting to bring the Titanic back to life. One example is Clive Palmer's project. He established the company Blue Star Line to build and operate a near replica of the Titanic. The maiden voyage was originally scheduled for 2016, then pushed to 2018. The ship was intended to be as close as possible to the original Titanic, but as of now, this project is dead in the water. There was also the Roman Decia Titanic project in China, which got as far as building a hull for the ship. However, that too turned out to be a complete failure. Hello everyone, it's Jamie from Old Shipping Lines, and in today's video, we're going to take a closer look at the failure of the Chinese Titanic project. The steel skeleton sits rusting in a Chinese river valley, a ghost of what might have been. This is all that remains of Xiao Jun's monumental dream, a full-scale Titanic replica that would never sail. Back in 2012, Xiao Jun had a vision. Inspired by James Cameron's blockbuster film, he wanted to build something extraordinary. Not just another museum exhibit, but a complete full-scale replica of the RMS Titanic. The budget was set at $155 million, an enormous investment for what would essentially become the world's most elaborate movie tribute. His company, Roman Decia, promised this would be an unsinkable museum ship, though it would never actually touch seawater. The location choice raised eyebrows from the beginning. Instead of a coastal city with maritime heritage, Xiao Jun selected landlocked Sichuan province, nearly 600 miles from the ocean. The replica would sit permanently docked on the Qi River, a waterway. Completely disconnected from the sea routes the original Titanic was built to conquer. This wasn't just about building a ship, it was about creating an entire experience. The plans were incredibly detailed. They promised authentic interiors matching the original Titanic's lavish design. The grand staircase, the first-class dining saloon, the cabins. Visitors would be able to stay overnight in hotel accommodations designed to recreate the 1912 experience. There would be themed experiences, museums, and even a proposed iceberg collision simulation that would later become highly controversial. Xiao Jun's promise was to keep the memories of the Titanic alive through this ambitious project. He saw it as both a tribute to maritime history and a major tourist attraction that would draw visitors from across China and beyond. The scale was unprecedented, a 269-meter-long replica that would dominate the Sichuan landscape, visible for miles around. Almost immediately, the project faced criticism from around the world. Families of Titanic survivors and maritime historians questioned the ethics of recreating a disaster that claimed over 1,500 lives. Many saw it as trivializing a mass maritime tragedy for entertainment purposes, turning human suffering into a theme park attraction. The debate intensified as details emerged about planned experiences. The proposed iceberg collision simulator particularly drew outrage. The idea of simulating the moment the ship struck the iceberg, The moment that doomed so many people struck many as deeply inappropriate. How could you recreate that moment of terror as entertainment? Professor Kan Ruliang from Peking University became one of the most vocal critics, calling the project a fake foreign antique that demonstrated poor cultural taste. He argued that China should be celebrating its own maritime heritage rather than recreating Western tragedies. The criticism touched on broader concerns about cultural appropriation and whether some stories should remain untouched by commercial recreation. Supporters argued there was educational value in allowing people to experience what the Titanic was really like. They pointed to other disaster memorials and museums around the world that help people understand historical events through recreation. But the line between education and exploitation seemed particularly thin when dealing with something as recent and well documented as the Titanic disaster. Even within China, opinions were divided. Some saw it as an ambitious tourist project that would bring economic benefits to Sichuan province. Others questioned whether spending $155 million on a replica of a foreign shipwreck was the best use of resources. The ethical debate would continue even as construction began, creating a cloud of controversy that would follow the project throughout its troubled development. Building a 269-meter ocean liner 600 miles from the nearest ocean presented challenges nobody had ever faced before. The original Titanic was constructed in Belfast, a major shipbuilding hub with direct access to the sea. This replica was being built in rural Sichuan province, where the largest vessels typically seen were river barges. The logistics were staggering, transporting thousands of tons of steel, specialized maritime equipment, and construction materials to a landlocked location required entirely new supply chains. The engineering team had to make fundamental modifications to the original design. Since this Titanic would never sail, they could eliminate the propulsion systems, but they had to reinforce the structure for permanent land-based support. The ship would sit in the Qi River, but unlike a seaworthy vessel, it needed permanent foundation support to prevent settling or shifting on the riverbed. They had to design for completely different stress points, a ship that would never experience waves or movement, but would bear the weight of thousands of daily visitors. Sourcing authentic materials proved incredibly difficult. The original Titanic used materials and construction techniques from 1912 that simply weren't available or legal today. Asbestos insulation, specific types of wood paneling, and even certain metal alloys had to be substituted, with modern equivalents while maintaining the historical appearance. The team acquired original blueprints from maritime archives, but converting century-old designs to meet modern building codes and safety regulations required constant compromise between authenticity and practicality. Scale replication created unexpected technical difficulties. At 269 meters long, the replica was one of the largest static structures ever attempted in inland China. Modern fire safety regulations, disability access requirements, and crowd management considerations forced design changes the original ship never needed. Emergency exits, sprinkler systems, and modern plumbing all had to be integrated into a design that was meant to replicate a 1912 environment. Every modern convenience became an engineering challenge when hidden within historical recreation. Weather and location added another layer of complexity. Sichuan province experiences heavy seasonal rains that frequently flooded the construction site, delaying work for weeks at a time. The remote location meant specialized workers had to be brought in from coastal cities, increasing costs and creating communication challenges between local construction crews and maritime specialists. Equipment that would be standard in shipyards had to be transported overland, often requiring disassembly and reassembly at the site. The first major red flag appeared when the initial 2016 completion deadline came and went with only the hull partially constructed. What should have been a moment of celebration became instead a quiet acknowledgement that the project timeline was unrealistic. Construction progress photos showed gradual advancement, but never at the pace needed to meet the ambitious schedule. Local newspapers began questioning whether the promised economic benefits would ever materialize. Funding shortfalls emerged as the primary obstacle. The $155 million budget proved inadequate for the scale of challenges they faced. Specialized maritime construction in a landlocked location carried premium costs for every aspect, from custom fabricated components to imported materials. Investors grew nervous as costs escalated, while progress remained slow. Several promised funding rounds failed to materialize, leaving construction teams waiting for payments and causing work stoppages. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, which delivered the project's most devastating blow. Construction halted completely for months during lockdowns. When work eventually resumed, it was at reduced capacity with strict health protocols that slowed progress further. Supply chain disruptions made materials harder to obtain and more expensive. International specialists couldn't travel to the site, leaving critical engineering problems unsolved. The pandemic turned a struggling project into a nearly impossible one. Rising costs eventually exceeded the original budget by tens of millions. Every delay meant additional expenses. Equipment rentals extended, workforce maintained longer than planned, security for the dormant site. The project became a financial sinkhole where money disappeared without visible progress. Local officials who had initially supported the project began distancing themselves as it became clear the economic benefits were unlikely to materialize. Workforce challenges multiplied as the project stalled. Skilled workers left for more reliable employment, taking their expertise with them. Remaining crews faced morale problems working on a project that seemed increasingly unlikely to ever finish. Construction halts became more frequent, longer lasting as funding gaps appeared. By 2019, satellite imagery showed virtually no progress for months at a time, with the partially completed superstructure exposed to the elements, beginning the rusting process that would eventually dominate its appearance. Today, the Roman Decia Titanic stands as a haunting monument to failed ambition. What was meant to be a gleaming tribute to maritime history now sits as a rusting, unfinished skeleton in the Sichuan countryside. The hull and partial superstructure show advanced corrosion from years of exposure to the elements, with peeling paint and oxidized steel creating a stark contrast to the polished vision once presented in promotional materials. Only 6 of the planned 9 decks were partially completed before construction stalled completely. Walking through the site reveals a bizarre hybrid of construction and decay. Half-finished staircases leading to empty spaces, partially installed railings that go nowhere, and vast sections where only the structural framework exists. The grand staircase, meant to be the centerpiece of the luxury experience, exists only as steel supports, without the mahogany paneling and glass dome that would have made it magnificent. Satellite imagery tells the story of stagnation. Photos from 2019 show the structure in nearly identical condition to what exists today. No significant progress has been made in over 5 years. The construction cranes that once dominated the skyline have been removed. The temporary worker facilities have been dismantled. The site now has an eerie quietness, with only security personnel occasionally patrolling the perimeter of what has become a massive white elephant. The timeline comparison with the original Titanic adds to the irony. The actual Titanic took just 3 years to build from keel laying to completion in 1912, despite being the most complex ship of its era. This replica has been under construction for over a decade and remains unfinished. Where Harland and Wolf Shipyard employed 15,000 workers who completed the original in record time, this project has seen workforce numbers dwindle to virtually zero. The local economic impact on Dane County has been profound. Instead of the promised tourism boom and job creation, the area now hosts a massive construction site that generates no revenue. Local businesses that anticipated serving tourists and construction workers never saw the promised customers. The county government, which initially supported the project with land and permits, now faces questions about why they approved such an ambitious and ultimately unrealistic venture. The Roman Decia project's landlocked location created unique problems that other replicas avoided. Building a ship replica away from traditional shipbuilding infrastructure meant every component had to be custom engineered for land assembly. There were no dry docks, no maritime cranes, no experienced shipwrights readily available. This isolation from maritime expertise proved to be a critical weakness that coastal projects didn't face. From an industry perspective, the failure of the Roman Decia project highlights the extreme difficulty of Titanic replication. Maritime historians and shipbuilding experts have noted that the original Titanic's design doesn't translate well to modern requirements, whether for static display or actual seafaring. The combination of historical accuracy, modern safety, and financial viability has proven to be a challenge that no project has fully overcome, making the Roman Decia story not just about one failed project, but about the inherent difficulties in recreating maritime history on this scale. Other disaster memorials and recreations show this same dynamic. Pompeii, the 9/11 Memorial, Chernobyl tours, all allow people to safely experience tragedy from a distance. But the Titanic replica project walked a particularly fine line because it wasn't just memorializing the event, but recreating the luxury environment where people died. The proposed hotel accommodations and dining experiences would have placed visitors in the exact spaces where real people spent their final hours, raising questions about where tribute ends and exploitation begins. The debate continues about whether such recreations honor memory or trivialize tragedy. Some argue that experiencing the grandeur of the Titanic helps people understand what was lost that night in 1912. Others maintain that turning a mass casualty event into an entertainment experience crosses an ethical line that shouldn't be crossed. The Roman Decia project, by attempting to recreate the entire experience rather than just memorialize the victims, found itself at the center of this difficult conversation. The parallel between the original ship's fate and its replica's failure creates a haunting symmetry. Both projects were declared unsinkable in their own ways, the original through technological arrogance, the replica through financial confidence. Both fell victim to unforeseen circumstances that their creators failed to adequately prepare for. The iceberg that doomed the Titanic finds its counterpart in the pandemic, funding shortfalls, and engineering challenges that sank the replica project. There's profound symbolism in two ambitious projects doomed by different forms of hubris. The White Star Line believed they had conquered nature with their unsinkable ship. Roman Decia believed they could conquer geography, economics, and cultural differences to build a full-scale replica hundreds of miles from the ocean. Both undertakings underestimated the complexity of their ambitions and overestimated their ability to control outcomes. What remains today serves as an unintended monument to failed ambition. The rusting hull in Sichuan province stands as a different kind of memorial, not to the 1,500 people who died in 1912, but to the human tendency to reach beyond our grasp. Visitors who occasionally sneak past security to photograph the site often comment on the eerie atmosphere, where the ghost of what might have been feels almost as palpable as the physical structure itself. The future remains uncertain. Some local officials still talk about finding new investors to complete the project, though the deteriorating condition makes this increasingly unlikely. Each year of exposure to Sichuan's humid climate and seasonal rains further damages the unprotected steelwork. Demolition would be enormously expensive and politically embarrassing, so the structure continues its slow decay, a process that ironically mirrors how the actual Titanic's wreck is gradually being consumed by iron-eating bacteria on the ocean floor. Ultimately, the story of the Roman Decia Titanic reflects our complex relationship with historical tragedy. We want to remember, to understand, to experience, but we struggle to find the right way to honor the past without exploiting it. The rusting hull in China serves as a reminder that some stories resist recreation, some tragedies defy commercialization, and some dreams, no matter how ambitious, are perhaps better left as memories rather than reconstructions.
And that marks the end of a video, my friends. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing to the channel, as that would help out the channel a lot. Now, if you have any thoughts, comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below, as I absolutely love reading your comments. And please let me know in the comment section down below as well what ships you would like me to cover in the future. Now be as well sure to check out our social media pages. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also recently have a website, oldshippinglines.com, where we have articles of the ships we cover and we have book reviews as well. I think you will enjoy the website very much. Now, with that out of the way, guys, I wish you all a good night or day, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay happy, and we will see each other on the next video. Goodbye, my friends.